which I've never seen it do before. Oh, hello. There I am. Thank you. Um, my name is Abby Foster. I am running for House District 27 in the Northeast Heights. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to the Indivisible team for having me here to speak. I am running for House District 27. I'm challenging our incumbent rep, Marion Matthews, in the primary on June 2nd. I'm an attorney. I have my own law firm where I represent adults with disabilities in guardianship cases. And I'm running because I believe that New Mexico should be a state where families can thrive. And by that, I mean we need better access to healthcare. We need more housing that working families can afford. And every kid in New Mexico deserves a public school as good as the ones that my kids go to. My husband David and I have lived here in the district for almost 10 years now. We're raising our kids here. They go to the public school up the street. And every day I'm out talking to our neighbors about what's important to them. I was talking to my manager Danny yesterday, and I've knocked 750 doors already. And signatures are due tomorrow, so I think we'll be okay. So the folks I'm talking to in the neighborhood are voicing all the same concerns that we all have. It takes way too long to get an appointment with your primary care provider, let alone a specialist. And this is happening in Albuquerque. This is not a rural New Mexico county where the healthcare shortage is even worse. Housing is way too expensive. Cost of housing has been rising a ton in the past few years, and wages have not kept pace. Families are feeling the squeeze, and it's not sustainable. We need more affordable housing. My kids go to a great public school, but most kids in New Mexico don't have access to a great public school. And strong schools should be the norm, not the exception. So I will focus on strengthening schools across the state. To be clear, I am challenging our incumbent rep in a primary. Marion Matthews is running for her fourth term in the House, and I'm challenging her because her votes and her capital outlay choices do not reflect our democratic values. She voted against paid family medical leave for several years running. We still don't have it. In this past session, last month, she voted against a lobbying transparency bill that died in a tie on the House floor. So if she had voted for it, it would have passed the House. And that's a choice that she made that's affecting everyone in the state, not just our district. In 2025, she voted absent more than any other rep. And when she did vote, she voted against raising the royalty rate on oil and gas, which is money that goes to education. So now is not a time for elected leaders who are checked out and inconsistent. We need a rep who's fully in this fight with us. And I'm living these struggles every day. I'm watching my own costs rise. I'm worried about my own kids' safety. And we're navigating the same inadequate healthcare system that everybody else is. And to win this race, we're going to need everybody's help. I need volunteers to knock doors and to make calls. We're going to need to raise a lot of money. Marion Matthews has been very well funded by business interests. And so while I would not be running if I was not sure I could win, this race is not going to be easy and it's not going to be cheap. So please, if you are available to volunteer, we very much need your help. If you are able to donate, we very much need your support. I so appreciate all of you being here this evening. I'm going to put my Act Blue and my website and my contact info in the chat. And Thank you all for being here. I'm happy to stand for questions. I'm not sure how much time we have, but um, I'm happy to answer whatever I have time for.
Oh, we have plenty of time, so ask
Okay.
questions.
I have lost track of how long we're going or whatever, but okay.
We probably have 5-10 minutes for questions.
Solid. Are you going to call on people? You want me to call on people? I see Kathy has a
Kathleen,
question.
Kathleen, you have a question? Kathleen and then Willie.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you for running, Abby, first of all. And then, as you know, and some folks know, I'm a public health nurse, and I'm very concerned that gun violence is the leading cause of children's deaths. That's pretty hard for a public health nurse to take. And I'm supporting you in part because I know you're an advocate for firearm safety. So I just wanted to give you a moment to express anything that you would like about what you would like to do in that regard.
Um, Thank you. The Yeah, I mean, my kids go to public school and it terrifies me every day. I graduated high school 2 weeks after Columbine happened. So they weren't doing like all the drills and stuff that they do now when I was in high school, but like it was just starting. Um, there was Senate Bill 17 in this session, I believe, that died that was going to prohibit the sale of high capacity magazines, and I was so sad when it died. Um, I know that coming down from the Supreme Court, we have a lot of questions now about what is and is not constitutional regarding waiting periods and um, bans on high capacity magazines and all of this kind of stuff. And so in the legislature, I would be paying a lot of attention to exactly where the lines are and what the rulings are saying at that point. And um, if we can get a gun regulation that that looks like it'll stand up and be strong on appeals, then I'm going to vote for it. I'd support it. Um, the what was I had a thought? Now it's gone now. So never mind.
Okay, Willie, what's your
Oh,
question?
I support common sense gun regulation. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah, Abby, thanks for coming. You also mentioned that you were upset with how Representative Matthews spent her discretionary funds. Could you
Hmm.
go into that a little bit more? What?
Yeah. So we were looking at her capital outlay in 2025. I don't believe that it's public that the capital outlay in 2026 is out yet. But so they get $2.5 million in capital outlay that they can spend on capital projects basically however they want. And in 2025, 1.5 million of her 2.5 million went outside the district. The largest chunk of that was to the pool at North Domingo Baca, which is going to be a great pool, but it's not in the district. And there are Title I schools in the district that need help. I mean, there are projects in the district that could have really benefited from that. And also, she did contribute a lot of capital outlay to the public schools in the district, but then she also contributed a fair amount of capital outlay to charter schools that are not in the district. And so, I mean, I would be putting capital outlay toward schools that are in the district and public schools that are in the district, I should clarify, and the schools that they feed into. So I believe there is one middle school in the district, but not all the kids in the district feed into that one. And I mean, I'd be willing to contribute to the one that they do feed into, but does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Carl, you
Thanks.
have a question for Abby.
Yeah, Abby, tell us your thoughts on the Blackstone buyout of PNM and also BCP and their private equity buyout of NM Gas. Thank you.
Okay. I am not as informed on these deals as you are. I can pretty much guarantee you. Um, I am opposed to private equity buyouts of public utilities. I don't think it's a good idea. I don't support corporate ownership of utilities. I don't think it usually goes well. Um, we need to be protecting New Mexicans from corporate control over the utilities, and our energy system needs to be prioritizing reliability, affordability, and at the very least, we need to be heavily scrutinizing the process.
Thank you. Abby, I think we're all just really glad that you're doing this. And oh, Richard, you have a quick question?
Yes,
Richard?
had to get off mute there.
Yeah.
So a bill was introduced in this past session that would have made microgrids subject to the same requirements as public utilities. And right now they aren't covered by the Energy Transition Act. And the problem is some of these microgrids are absolutely humongous. Would you support making microgrids subject to the requirements that they ramp down their carbon producing emissions and ramp up their renewable sources, similar to utilities?
To look a lot more closely at that one. I know, like, I remember people talking about it, and it just wasn't one that I was following. Um, like, utility regulation has not historically been my strong suit yet, I'll say.
Okay. Well, we will await your position on that. Appreciate your
Yeah, I'll get
position
back to you.
I appreciate your position on the private equity issue because it's something we're working really hard on.
Yeah.
You may know that we just released a 42-page report about the impact Blackstone would have on New Mexico and the corporate business practices of Blackstone. They're not a good player in any field. So welcome your perspective on that. I know that should you win the primary and then the general, all of the Blackstone stuff will either happen or not. It will have happened or not. But we're working as hard as we can to make sure we preserve what we have. Richard, you had another quick question?
No, I've got an announcement to make though.
Okay, quickly.
So I just got a text from Camilla Feibelman, who just got a text from Maggie Toulouse-Oliver. And the
Okay.
governor has signed into law Senate Bill 264.
Woohoo!
So you guys are awesome. It's not often you get such immediate
There you go.
positive results from your activism.
That's
You should
pretty.
have call time at every meeting.
I know we should do that. We're going to have to start doing that. She was waiting. All the calls came in and then she signed it.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's pretty damn great. All right. Okay. Over to our main speaker tonight, David Parsons. Going to talk about the Mexican wolf, history, ecology, and conservation. So welcome, David.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Just a little background. I'm a wildlife biologist. I spent 24 years with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. Retired from them in 1999, and I've spent the last 26 years working with nonprofit conservation organizations, and in particular, the Rewilding Institute, where I hold the position of carnivore conservation biologist and a board member, and Project Coyote, which is a national animal conservation organization based out of California, where I'm a science advisor. Wildlife biology is my passion, and I can't seem to stop doing it. So when I was with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, my last 10 years, I was given the job to initiate the Mexican wolf recovery program. It had been stalled for a number of years, but it was broken loose by, as you might expect, a lawsuit from the conservation community that forced the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to move forward with Mexican wolf recovery. And it forced them to hire a dedicated biologist whose job was nothing but getting that process done. I'm going to talk a bit about just general gray wolf ecology and history, but more specifically about the Mexican gray wolf. Let me see the next slide, please. So I can't cover it all in this talk, but I wrote a blog on the Rewilding Institute website last fall that would, if you're interested in more details from start to finish on the Mexican wolf saga, you can go to that QR code and see that blog. Next slide, please. Gray wolves were historically the most widely distributed land mammal in North America. They were circumpolar in their distribution around the globe in the northern hemisphere. All the different colors represent different subspecies of gray wolves, and those subspecies form when a wolf enters a particular habitat type that requires some evolution to maximize their potential for survival there. There are 5 recognized subspecies in North America, and the magenta colored tip down at the bottom is the Mexican gray wolf. It's the southernmost subspecies of gray wolf in North America and the most genetically unique, although they are all highly related and they can all interbreed with each other, but they adapt to their environments through evolution, and so they become a bit different. For example, a large male Mexican wolf might weigh 80 pounds, but a large male northern Canada wolf might weigh 120 or 130 pounds. And there's reasons for that. The prey is smaller in the south, the climate is warmer, and smaller animals are better at shedding heat than larger animals. So I'll be focusing mostly on the Mexican gray wolf in the rest of my talk. Next slide, please. I don't see the graphic on it. I wonder why the graphic's not showing up. Anyway, there's supposed to be a graphic there that shows the lower 48 states, and in prior to the 1800s, before European expansion, European colonist expansion into the West, scientists estimate there were roughly 400,000 wolves or more in the lower 48 states. Now, the first Americans to arrive were what we call the Native Americans, came between 15 and 20,000 years ago. Apparently, they didn't have an issue with the wolves. And so all the historic range was occupied prior to the expansion of European colonists. By 1970, with that expansion, and particularly movements to the west, especially large livestock grazing operations, put a lot of pressure on wolves, and the European attitude toward wolves is obviously very different than the Native American attitude, in that their attitude was that the only good wolf is a dead wolf, and so they waged war on wolves everywhere they occupied. And also, those early agriculturalists that went west were generally very connected politically, and they got Congress to pass a bill in 1915 that created an agency and funded it to rid the entire country of predatory animals, called Predatory Animal and Rodent Control Service. Then later became Wildlife Damage Control, and today has the euphemistic title of Wildlife Services, but they still do the same thing. They kill animals mostly. And they were allowed to use poisons, and they were well funded, and they would drop poison baits out of airplanes. And they managed to exterminate all the gray wolves in the lower 48 states by the mid 1900s, with the exception of a tiny group that held on in extreme northeastern Minnesota, which today is the Boundary Waters Canoe area. It was basically inaccessible. The Mexican wolves hung on a little longer in Mexico, but by 1980, they were gone there too. From that point on, they existed only as a captive population, and that captive population stemmed from just 7 surviving animals from the entire historic population. There, let's go to the next slide. So, gray wolves, both northern and Mexican gray wolves, were saved essentially at the very last minute by the passage of the Endangered Species Act during the Nixon administration. Quite arguably one of the strongest animal protection acts ever passed by a public body. It grants protection for imperiled species, provides a list to put them on if they are in danger of extinction or threatened to be in danger of extinction. And then it mandates all federal agencies to take actions necessary for the recovery and conservation of those species on the list. Every federal agency, including the military agencies. The Mexican wolf was put on that list in 1976. Next slide, please. So that allowed for the development of recovery plans and the implementation of recovery plans. It's a long process. You have to go through a very rigorous bureaucratic process established by the rules of the Endangered Species Act and the Administrative Procedures Act. So we're talking about things like public meetings and environmental impact statements and actually getting permission from high-level officials to go forth with recovering wolf populations. Wolf recovery was so controversial that the authority for that was never delegated out of Washington, D.C., and it was held by the Secretary of Interior for the various wolf recovery projects in the country. In the northern Rocky Mountains region, wolves were released in Idaho and Yellowstone National Park, and wolves were allowed to move out of Canada into northern Montana, and that's how that population was reestablished. Doing quite well today, except that it no longer has protection under the Endangered Species Act. That's a different story. That was John Tester's floating a bill that took them off the endangered species list because he feared for his reelection back in 2011. Another recovery program was established for the Northern Great Lakes, which did not require the releases of wolves. It just required their protection as they migrated out of Canada back into the United States. Ours, the Mexican Gray Wolf Program, was the third gray wolf recovery program, and we had to start, like I said, from scratch with 7 captive animals, breed those in captivity until we had enough animals to start putting them back into the wild, which started in 1998. I failed to mention that the southeastern quadrant of the United States, which was never occupied by gray wolves, was the home of a different wolf called the red wolf, which is actually native to North America. All of the gray wolves migrated here across the Bering Land Strait. Next slide, please. So after a long process, 8 years, in fact, a bureaucratic process with public meetings and hearings and draft EISs and final EISs, we finally got permission from Secretary Bruce Babbitt to initiate our reintroduction program. And that began on March 29th, 1998, which happened that year to be Super Bowl Sunday. But obviously, I was not watching the game. Managing one of these affairs with a cabinet secretary, it's a bit of a nightmare in and of itself, but it was way cool that Secretary Babbitt felt it was important that he be there in person. The other person at the front of the parade is Jamie Clark, who was then director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The lady in the back is a granddaughter of Aldo Leopold, and I'll talk a little bit about Leopold later. But he was a really strong figure in the Southwest and a prominent conservationist in the 20th century. So we got the wolves in a pen. I'll take the next slide. This is one of the wolves that went into that pen, a gorgeous wolf. That's a yearling female. And the wolves that went in that pen were called the Campbell Blue Pack. There were 3 in that family. And 2 other release sites were also occupied with wolves, and totaling 3 packs with a total of 11 wolves that were let out of their pens in March of 1998. Those were the first gray wolves to reoccupy their range in 50 some years or more. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a bit about wolf ecology. Wolves in general are referred to as keystone species. Another term is apex predator. Another term is strongly interacting species. But the apex predator gives you the right picture, and that is that they occupy the tip of that food pyramid, which you learned all about in your high school biology class. They're at the top. They have no natural predators of their own except other members of their own species, interestingly enough, because they establish territories and defend them fiercely. But they have an outsized influence on the entire ecosystem that's not commensurate with their numbers. Their numbers are smaller than any other level in the food pyramid, but they control the operation of the whole ecosystem from top to bottom. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. First of all, the keystone species in the Southwest would be the Mexican gray wolf, and today also the mountain lion. But there's a couple of historic keystone species in the Southwest that are missing today. You might guess what they are. Jaguar is one, and we at the Rewilding Institute are very interested in trying to figure out ways to get jaguars back into the southwestern United States, where they existed historically. Also missing is the grizzly bear. That'll be a little dicier project to take on, but if we're successful with jaguars, we may move to grizzly bears. Next slide, please. Well, what the top carnivores do is they regulate the populations of the large grazing herbivores, like the deer and the elk in particular. Herbivores did not evolve with natural population control mechanisms, because that was the job of the predators above them in the food pyramid. So without their predators, they breed without control, and they overpopulate their range. They decimate their range in many cases. They affect biodiversity on a major level by denuding their rangelands, and they really need to be controlled. And human hunting doesn't get the job done for a couple of reasons. Is that humans don't hunt like natural predators year round, day and night. And the human hunters want to keep a population of those species on the land so that they don't ever run out of them as a hunting opportunity. So we really need the natural predators to keep these populations in check. A quick story: when wolves were returned to Yellowstone National Park, the habitat had been absolutely demolished by elk that had bred up to a population of something like 18,000 elk in Yellowstone National Park. Following the return of the wolves, that population was reduced to somewhere around 6,000 to 8,000 elk. And the wolf population ended up stabilizing at around 100 wolves. And there seems to be a reestablishment of what's called a dynamic equilibrium between predator and prey in Yellowstone National Park. It's one of the few places where we can study these systems naturally because it's off limits to human hunting and livestock grazing. Elsewhere, it's a little dicier to sort out all these interactions in the ecosystem. Next slide, please. The second thing that large carnivores do is they keep the smaller carnivores' populations in check. Wolves will kill coyotes, and coyotes will kill foxes. And so keeping these populations in check keeps that scientists call them mesopredators, the mid-sized predators, in balance in the ecosystem. And it also minimizes the pressure they put on. Next slide, please. The smaller animals in the ecosystem. These are 10 species, and there's one not shown, which is a kangaroo rat, that exist in southwestern semi-desert ecosystems. And they exist in that variety only when the predation is limited above them. And even little critters have important jobs in ecosystems. I mean, they can distribute seeds, they can aerate soils with their burrows, allowing more water penetration into the ground. So keeping the top carnivores at effective populations, and that's critical, ecologically effective populations. It's not something the Fish and Wildlife Service even thinks about when they do recovery, but they should, is really important to keeping ecosystems healthy and diverse. Next slide, please. The last thing that I'll talk about is that top carnivores leave a lot of meat laying around on the ground. This is Yellowstone National Park. And that meat is available to scavengers once the wolves have had their first big meal and they go off to take a nap. So what shows up are all kinds of things: ravens and crows and vultures and magpies and jays. And they found 100 species of beetles eating these carcasses in Yellowstone. And another interesting phenomenon that was observed was that grizzly bears, once the wolves were there, some grizzly bears chose not even to hibernate because there was enough food left throughout the winter to keep them alive. So just another story about how all things are connected in ecosystems, and every role is important. Next slide, please. This is Aldo Leopold, and he came to the Southwest as a fresh graduate of the Yale School of Forestry to work for the Forest Service in 1909. That same year, he and his party of foresters were having a lunch break down on the Black River, and they all had guns, of course. And back then, they still thought it was the best thing to do. The best fate for a wolf was to kill it. And as they were sitting on a bluff above the Black River, they saw some animals crossing the stream, and it turned out to be a pack of wolves. So they opened fire and they killed a couple of them. And Leopold went down, and years later, after he pondered and learned more about ecology, he knew more about ecology almost before the term was developed. He realized that that was a big mistake. And I can't see the top of my slide, but hopefully it says the something like the highest indication of ignorance is the person who says of an animal, "What good is it?" And we can't know what good all animals are, but we have to assume that if they're here, there must be a purpose for it. He was very instrumental in changing the worldview about the value of wolves and their importance in ecosystems. Next slide, please. So rewilding has become a pretty popular term. Our own Dave Foreman, who lived for the last 25 years in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, sadly passed away 2 years ago. actually coined the term rewilding and wrote the first treatise on the topic called Rewilding North America, which is a classic now, conservation classic, about putting ecosystems back together on grand scale. And that word now has been adopted by the Oxford Dictionary, and we see it being used all over the world now, and in various places. And not a resurgence, an initiation of an awareness around the globe now of the importance for restoring nature back to a level of diversity that maintains ecological processes and ecological health and the health of our entire planet. So we can be proud here in Albuquerque that we were had Dave Foreman, and he founded the Rewilding Institute, which I joined as his conservation biologist as soon as he created the organization. I had just freshly retired from the Fish and Wildlife Service. Next slide, please. So this is the Gila Wilderness. This is prime habitat for deer and elk and wolves. I'm planning a backpack there in about a month. So I'm going to go back to this very place for, I don't know how many times I've gone back to this place, but I was the person on duty when the first wolves were let out of their pen in the Gila Wilderness back in the year 2000. So it's kind of a special place for me. Next slide, please. So what we'll talk about that will interest all of you, I hope, is two bills that are in play in Congress that if both were to pass, there would not be a single gray wolf left in the United States that is protected under the Endangered Species Act. They would no longer have federal protection. They would be managed by the state game management agencies, which in the places where they have control are killing wolves like you wouldn't believe. And that's Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. Everywhere else, they're still on the list, but thanks to John Tester, they're not protected in Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana. And there's some pretty heinous rules in place for hunting them. Last I checked, there were 241 wolves had been killed in the wolf season this year in Montana. In Wyoming, you can kill them almost anywhere in the state, any time of the day, any day of the year. You can run over them with snowmobiles. That's how the states manage wolves, and it's quite egregious. So this is Lauren Boebert, and what she's done is the same trick that Tester used. This is her entire bill. She's going back to a regulation that was passed in the first Trump administration that declared that the northern gray wolves were ready for delisting, and the legislation would delist the wolves. And that was challenged in court by the conservation community. The court ruled that that delisting was premature and did not follow the rules of the Endangered Species Act and did not meet the test of having been having the best science applied to that recommendation, which the Endangered Species Act requires that all decisions are made solely on the basis of best science, and it actually says not tainted by politics. So she's bringing this regulation back to life that was overruled by the courts. And look at this last line. This is what Tester started. And I see it all the time now in legislation. It drives me crazy. A reissuance of the final rule under Section 2 shall not be subject to judicial review. Personally, I think this is unconstitutional because they're cutting a co-equal branch of government completely out of the process. So if her bill passes, no one can file a lawsuit against it, which is the case right now with Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. That's why they're slaughtering wolves up there. So I'd like to see if there are attorneys in the crowd, somebody needs to take this on. Like, I don't think this can possibly be constitutional, but I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. But that's her entire bill. And if it passes, all the wolves north of the Southwest, the whole country that are gray wolves, will be off the endangered species list forever. So that one has actually passed the House and it's sitting in the Senate. And I can't see the top, but the bill number is up there, if you can see it. And then let's go to the next slide for the next bill. There are the same things going on down here. Representative Paul Gosar over in Arizona, at the urging of primarily the livestock industry, has introduced his bill. All these bills have crazy titles like Enhancing Safety for Animals, which conveniently has the acronym ESA, which is the same acronym for the Endangered Species Act. His bill would remove all Mexican wolves from the list of threatened endangered species. There's a whole lot more to this bill because there never was a priority listing. So he has to justify in his bill the reasons why he is promoting this delisting. And so there are several stanzas to this bill that I'm not putting on the screen, but the next slide will give you a QR code. If we can go to the next slide. And I took his bill and I modified it with annotations after the pertinent sections of his bill that explains what's true and not true, what's not based on science, and what's not allowed under the Endangered Species Act. And so if you go to that code, you can see my annotated version of that bill. And I would encourage everyone to contact senators for the Boebert bill and representatives for the Gosar bill because it passed committee. It's been introduced to the House. It would have to pass the House and the Senate to be law. But if it does, all the work to date for bringing back the Mexican gray wolves would come to a halt, at least the federal oversight of that work. And their management would be given to the states. There would be no federal nexus to that project anymore. So next slide. I'm going to end my formal comments there. Thank you for your attention and stand for however much time we have for questions.
Well, thank you for that. That's certainly a tale. I appreciate it. Carla, your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you were to trace the amount of damage done to the cattle industry, how bad would that look? I mean, we're wiping out these wolf populations. Are they really consuming that much in commercial cattle?
Well, the short answer is no, they're not. And the claims are exaggerated as to how much damage is being done. But the concern to me is different depending on the status of the land. Most cattle grazing in the Southwest is done on public land, mostly national forests and Bureau of Land Management. And that's where wolf recovery is focused, is on the public land. And the public lands have multiple use mandates. They're not just for cattle grazing, they're for all sorts of things. And one of those things is wildlife conservation. And the cattle industry seems to have the attitude that their interest in the public lands is the primary one, and it is primary to all their interests. And we have to make room on our public lands for those other uses. And wolf recovery is one of those. No way we can do it on private land. So we really have to focus on the public lands. And the mandates are there to the public agencies to make this happen. Although a lot of the public agencies like the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management are heavily influenced by the extractive industries. ranching and mining in particular, and have historically not given the full share of those lands to wildlife conservation. But that's being forced by the Endangered Species Act. The other thing is that the ranchers grazing on public lands, in part because of the multi-use mandate, pay only $1.69 a month to run a cow and her calf. And if you go to the U.S. Department of Agriculture and look at the average price for grazing lands in the Southwest, it's about $17 per animal unit a month, they call it, which is a cow and a calf for a month for $1.60. It was $1.35, but it just got raised a couple of weeks ago to $1.69. But the common refrain in the conservation community is you can't feed a hamster for that. That reduced fee is, in part, in my mind, compensation already for the potential to be losing some livestock to predators on the land. I'll leave it at that.
There's a question in the chat. Let's see. What happened with the Catron County state of emergency from last year? Catron County.
Catron County, a state of emergency, based on their claim of threat to livestock industry from wolves and the threat to humans from wolves. Never in recorded history has there ever been a case of a Mexican gray wolf attacking a human being. But they built these wolf-proof bus stops as a publicity stunt for the students in the to come on, the ranch students to stand in these cages while to wait for the bus to come. And Catron County passed that state of emergency. They wanted the governor to issue National Guard troops and all kinds of things to the county to protect them from the wolves. A couple of other counties endorsed Catron County's state of emergency, and a county or two in Arizona did the same thing. But it's, in my opinion, a major publicity stunt to get their way. And they're in the driver's seat now because all of their folks are in charge in Washington, and they're trying to play it up as big as they can, sending entourages to Washington to meet with deputy secretaries of the Interior and such, and the director of the Fish and Wildlife Service. Director of Fish and Wildlife Service was the former director of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, where you can kill a wolf just about any day you want to. So you can see what we're up against. But under this administration, we the conservation community don't have friends in high places right now.
Okay. Joanne, you had a question?
Thank you, Dave.
Oh, hi, Joe.
Hi there.
I'm fine.
Can you just refresh that the first bill that you talked about is that now moot? And is the second one, HR 4255, more or less a replacement for it?
No, they're
Okay,
entirely different. But
they are. Okay, great. And also, what's the state of U.S. Fish and Wildlife wolf recovery staff and the current status of the wolves themselves here in our Southwest?
Oh, good question. Well, for the first one, the Boebert bill applies to the northern gray wolves only, and not the Mexican wolves. The GOSAR bill applies just to the Mexican wolves. Both bills' goal is to take them off the endangered species list. The Mexican wolf staff with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is still in place in their jobs, but their ability to implement the Endangered Species Act in terms of following best science in particular is highly compromised under the current political environment. Most of the decisions are really driven by the state game and fish agencies as to what direction the program should go. The numbers, if you just look at numbers, it's not looking all that bad. The progress has been slower than we predicted in the beginning, but starting with 11 wolves in 1998. They just published the count from last year, based on wolves that were on the ground at the end of 2025, and for the first time, the numbers went above 300. They came up with an estimate of 319 wolves. So numbers wise, the population is increasing. The real issues with genetics, because they had the genetics initially of 7 animals, but that got whittled down over time because they couldn't all be bred in captivity at the right pace. And so the animals in the wild now are related as if they came from just 2 founders. In other words, the average relationship between 2 wolves in the wild right now is the same as with you and your brother or sister. And that's not good genetically. And the agencies just don't seem to be concerned about that.
And a
Okay.
little follow-up, please. What's the most important state agency and the leadership that we should be in touch with to
Well,
hold it together?
we're only 2 involved, and that's the Arizona Game and Fish Department and the New Mexico Game and Fish Department, which soon will be the New Mexico Wildlife Department. Arizona has typically been the driving state agency on this, more so than New Mexico.
Okay. Patty wants to know how many wolves are in New Mexico now and how has that been going the past couple of years? Is their range expanding?
The range is expanding. They're allowed to occupy any place south of Interstate 40 and north of the international borders of Arizona and New Mexico with Mexico. So both states south of I-40 are available to the wolves, which is also another issue. There are more wolves in New Mexico than there are in Arizona, so you split the 320 in half, that's 160. There's probably upwards of 200 wolves in New Mexico right now.
Okay. Kathleen wants to know, how would you keep cattle and wolves apart so cattle are not impacted on public lands?
Well, that's the job of the ranchers. There are methods that can be used, and there are conservation groups that focus on teaching coexistence husbandry models to ranchers. One in particular is the Defenders of Wildlife. They've been doing this for 25 years down there, working with ranchers on coexistence models and using what are called non-lethal deterrence methods. So the method of ranching down here, because the wolves were eradicated so early on, is they just turn the cattle out on the range, and they'll have maybe an 80,000 acre grazing allotment on the Forest Service, and they'll turn a couple of hundred cows out and with bulls, and they breed whenever they choose, and these calves drop whenever the timing's right, and it's just a constant. The wolves focus on the smaller ones. Really, they're not really that interested in large cattle. But calves they are interested in. And so the ranchers could do a number of things. They could pull the cows into a confined area for the calving and time that calving time the breeding so the calving is simultaneous, keep them in confinement, protected from the wolves until the calves are a month or 2 old, and then put them on the range so that the calves are more able to defend themselves. They could use cattle that have horns that are better able to do battle with the wolf. They could employ ranch hands to actually ride with the herd, which has not typically been done, and keep the cattle herded because they're safer in herds than they are scattered across the range. So range riders have been has proven to be one of the more effective methods of reducing livestock depredation from wolves. And groups like the Defenders of Wildlife actually subsidize the salaries for range riders in the area. So for ranchers who are interested in actually trying to protect their cattle.
Okay, we've got time for probably one more question, and Catherine is in line. So Catherine, what is your question?
First, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I am discouraged that both of those bills that you mentioned are going to pass Congress. So given that, what do you see any hope in terms of our upcoming elections and protecting the Mexican gray wolf in the near future? I'm sorry, given local elections,
Local elections.
like gubernatorial, that kind of thing.
Well, I always see hope. Our governor right now is certainly an advocate for wolves, and I believe hopefully if we elect a Democratic governor, that'll stay the same. Problem is if Boebert's bill passes, there's no way to sue to reverse that one. Right now, Gosar's bill does not have that language in it. So if his bill passes, it's almost certain that the collective conservation community will file a lawsuit, and they will prevail because his bill totally violates the Endangered Species Act. So we could probably get that one reversed if it passes, if that language does not get thrown onto it that would prohibit judicial review. I'm hoping that what I experienced when I was working for the government is that administrations don't like to see controversial issues surface very close to elections. And so that maybe these bills will be put on back burners until after the midterms. And hopefully we'll be in a better position to defeat those bills then. That's my best hope right now. So.
Okay, well, David, thank you so much for your presentation tonight. Appreciate everybody making your comments and staying involved. There's a couple more comments in the chat. What is wolf hazing?
Wolf hazing?
Hazing, Hazing.
That's non-lethal methods to scare a wolf.
Okay.
Loud noises. You can actually put up colored flags on a rope. That was a technique used in ancient Europe that works. And you can rubber bullets, for example, that wouldn't injure the wolf, but would give them a little sting, and various things like that that would cause a wolf to move away.
Okay. Want to thank everybody for coming, and we will see you next week. Thank you, David. Appreciate everybody's attendance tonight.
Thank you all.
Next week. Woo! Thank you. Goodbye.